Declaro abierta la octava sesión plenaria de la cuarta Conferencia Internacional sobre Financiación para el Desarrollo. La conferencia examinará primero el subtema B del tema 7 del programa titulado Informe de la Comisión de Verificaciones de Poderes. La conferencia tiene ante sí el informe de la Comisión de Verificación de Poderes, publicado como documento A/com.227/2025/5, relativo a las credenciales de representación ante la cuarta Conferencia Internacional sobre Financiación para el Desarrollo. Doy ahora la palabra al presidente de la Comisión de Verificaciones de Poderes, excelentísimo señor Walton Alfonso Webson, quien presentará el informe de la Comisión.
So we go ahead? Yeah. Thank you, Mr. President. Excellencies, on behalf of the Credential Committee, I have the honor to introduce the report of the committees concerning the credentials of the representatives of the states and the European Union to the Fourth International Conference on Financing on Development, contained in document A/CONF.227/2025/5. Having considered the credentials of the representatives at its meeting on July 8th, 2025, on the 2nd of July, 2025, the Credentials Committee adopted without a vote a draft resolution accepting the credentials. Colleagues, the committee also recommended to the plenary of the conference the adoption of the draft resolution concerning the credentials of the representatives to the conference, contained in paragraph 18 of the report of the committee. I would like also, colleagues, to note that since the meeting of the Credentials Committee, formal credentials were received by the Secretary General regarding the following: El Salvador, Guatemala, Kenya, Portugal, and Zambia. The conference is therefore requested to adopt the draft resolution, providing the report of the meeting of the Credentials Committee, and accept the and accept the additional credentials submitted subsequently to the meeting of the Credentials Committee. Finally, colleagues, I would like to express my gratitude and appreciation to the members of the Credentials Committee and to the Secretariat for facilitating our work. I thank you, Mr. President.
De verificación de poderes. Doy las gracias al presidente de la Comisión de Verificación de Poderes. ¿Puedo considerar que la conferencia desea aprobar el proyecto de resolución titulado Informe de la Comisión de Verificación de Poderes, recomendado por la Comisión en el párrafo 18 de su informe, y aceptar las credenciales adicionales de las que se acaba de informar a la conferencia? Si no hay objeciones, así queda acordado. La conferencia ha concluido así el examen del subtema B, del tema 7 del programa y del tema 7 del programa en su totalidad. Distinguidas jefas y jefes de Estado y de Gobierno, ministras, ministros, excelencias, invito a la conferencia a pasar al tema 9 del programa, titulado Mesas redondas de múltiples interesados. Las 6 mesas redondas se centraron en diversos temas. Deseo dar mi más sincera felicitación a las copresidencias de las mesas redondas de múltiples interesados por su destacado liderazgo. Invito ahora al excelentísimo señor Mohamed Ould Jallow, vicepresidente de la República de Sierra Leona, a presentar un resumen de la mesa redonda de múltiples interesados 1 sobre el tema movilización y armonización de los recursos nacionales públicos. También en nombre del copresidente, el excelentísimo señor Alas Karis, presidente de la República de Estonia.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, a multi-stakeholder roundtable 1, mobilizing and aligning domestic public resources. Excellency, distinguished delegates, I was honored to co-chair the multi-stakeholder roundtable 1, entitled Mobilizing and Aligning Domestic Public Resources, held on 30 June 2025, along with His Excellency Alas Karis, the President of the Republic of Estonia. 1, there was broad consensus that strengthening domestic revenue collection is fundamental for sustainable development. Countries emphasize that they are already working hard to strengthen their domestic tax system and digitalize their tax administrations. Countries shared concrete strategies focused on implementing progressive, equitable tax reforms, but also called for greater capacity building efforts to further strengthen fiscal systems in developing countries. 2, speakers emphasized the importance of supporting a more inclusive and effective international tax architecture with universal support for the UN Framework Convention on International Tax Cooperation, as well as some calls for stronger mechanisms of transparency on beneficial ownership information, tax reporting, and taxation of high net worth individuals. 3, transparent and effective fiscal system. We are consistently linked to strengthening the social contract. Many participants call for more effective public expenditure that aligns with sustainable development. The over 500 public development banks were recognized as critical for mobilizing long-term capital. There was strong support for the role of public development banks working together, including supporting national development banks to leverage greater resources from these banks. Thank you very much.
Agradezco al copresidente su declaración e invito ahora al excelentísimo señor Christopher McLennan, viceministro de Desarrollo Internacional de Canadá, a presentar un resumen de la mesa redonda de múltiples interesados 2 sobre el tema movilización del sector empresarial y financiero privado. También en nombre del copresidente, el excelentísimo señor Mohamed Aurangzeb, ministro federal de Finanzas e Ingresos de Pakistán.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to present the summary of Multi-Stakeholder Roundtable 2 entitled Leveraging Private Business and Finance, held on 1 July on behalf also of my co-chair, His Excellency Mohamed Aurangzeb, Federal Minister of Finance and Revenue of Pakistan. Participants emphasized that public resources alone cannot bridge the $4 trillion annual financing gap, making partnerships with private capital through blended finance, de-risking tools, and policy reforms crucial to scaling up investments, especially in climate adaptation, infrastructure, and in support for small and medium-sized enterprises. Speakers underscored the importance of domestic reforms to attract private investment, highlighting the need to strengthen capital markets, enhance data transparency, ensure regulatory certainty, and provide incentives aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals. The discussion highlighted innovative tools such as green bonds, debt for climate swaps, and first loss guarantees to channel private capital toward high-impact sectors. Multilateral development banks were urged to expand risk-sharing mechanisms and local currency financing to unlock larger private flows. While recognizing recent progress, participants highlighted ongoing challenges such as high capital costs in emerging markets, inequitable risk assessments, and the pressing need for concessional financing to help de-risk investments. Thank you very much.
Agradezco al copresidente su declaración. Invito ahora al distinguido representante de Portugal a presentar un resumen de la mesa redonda de múltiples interesados 3 sobre el tema revitalización de la cooperación internacional para desarrollo. En nombre de los copresidentes, el excelentísimo señor K.P. Sharma Oli, primer ministro de Nepal, y la excelentísima señora Ana Isabel Xavier, secretaria de Estado de Asuntos Exteriores y Cooperación y viceministra de Estado y Asuntos Exteriores de Portugal.
Señor presidente de la conferencia, distinguidos delegados, excelencias, I have the honor to present a summary of Multi-Stakeholder Roundtable 3 entitled Revitalizing International Development Cooperation, held on July 1st, 2025, on behalf of the co-chairs, His Excellency K.P. Sharma Oli, Prime Minister of Nepal, and Her Excellency Ana Isabel Xavier, Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and Cooperation of Portugal. There was broad consensus that international development cooperation remains indispensable for achieving the Sustainable Development Agenda. The need for political will to revitalize international development cooperation was highlighted by many delegations, with participants highlighting that the architecture needs to be simplified, fragmentation addressed, and coherence enhanced, with a strong role for the UN as a global convener. In the face of geopolitical tensions, fragmentation, and cascading crises, participants stress the need to meet long-standing ODA targets, while also strengthening the role of South-South and triangular cooperation to scale up solutions. Countries emphasize that development assistance is not charity, but a strategic necessity and responsibility fundamental to peace and security. Emphasis was placed on using development cooperation to catalyze public and private resources in financing for development and the need for all international assistance to strengthen national capacities and self-reliance. Participants called for shifting away from income-based metrics to multidimensional indicators that better capture structural vulnerabilities, especially for middle-income countries and countries in transition. The Beyond GDP Global Alliance and the MVI were highlighted as key tools to improve targeting of resources. I thank you.
Agradezco al representante de la copresidencia su declaración e invito ahora al distinguido representante de Eslovenia a presentar un resumen de la mesa redonda de múltiples interesados 4 sobre el tema afianzamiento del sistema de comercio multilateral y aprovechamiento del potencial de la ciencia, la tecnología y la innovación. En nombre de las copresidentas, la excelentísima señora Nadia Fetah, ministra de Economía y Hacienda de Marruecos, y la excelentísima señora Melita Gabric, viceministra de Asuntos Exteriores y Europeos y ministra de Desarrollo de Eslovenia.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to present the summary of Multi-Stakeholder Roundtable 4 entitled Upholding the Multilateral Trading System and Harnessing the Potential of Science, Technology and Innovation, held on July 2nd, 2025, on behalf of the co-chairs, Her Excellency Nadia Fetah, Minister of Economy and Finance of Morocco, and Her Excellency Melita Gabric, Deputy Minister for Foreign and European Affairs and Minister for Development of Slovenia. Participants reaffirmed the centrality of rules-based, inclusive, multilateral trading system with justice and fair competition. Yet participants also indicated that reform of the World Trade Organization is critical to ensure a functioning system. Many referred to the next WTO Ministerial Council meeting as critical for the future of multilateral trading system. Speakers noted the relevance of fostering a trading system that supports sustainable development, including by elaborating supply chains that include developing countries and enabling greater localization. Some participants expressed concern about unilateral measures that affect trade. There was also a call to promote a new model for investment agreements that respect policy space and enhance cooperation. Many speakers called for bold steps to close digital divides and advance transformations with the right policy and finance reforms and strengthening convergence on science and technology. While speakers recognized the large potential from investment in science and technology, there were also concerns expressed about the challenges from new technologies such as artificial intelligence. Overall, speakers also emphasized the need to go beyond finance and align financial systems with the real economy policies, technology, capacity building, and international trade in ways that promote sustainable development. Thank you.
Agradezco al representante de la copresidencia su declaración e invito ahora al excelentísimo señor Sigue, representante permanente de Senegal ante Naciones Unidas en Nueva York, a presentar un resumen de la mesa redonda de múltiples interesados 5 sobre el tema realización de una arquitectura de la deuda soberana orientada al desarrollo. En nombre de las copresidencias, el excelentísimo señor Pedro Sánchez, presidente del Gobierno de España, y el excelentísimo señor Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye, presidente de la República de Senegal.
Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs. J'ai l'honneur de présenter au nom des coprésidents Son Excellence Monsieur Bassirou Diomaye Diakhar Faye, président de la République du Sénégal, et Son Excellence Monsieur Pedro Sánchez, président du gouvernement d'Espagne, le résumé de la table ronde multipartite numéro 5, intitulé « Vers une architecture de la dette souveraine orientée vers le développement », tenu le 2 juillet 2025. Un large consensus s'est dégagé sur la nécessité de réformes supplémentaires de l'architecture de la dette souveraine, ainsi qu'un appel fort à accélérer les efforts de réforme afin de répondre au manque de l'espace budgétaire et aux pressions liées à l'endettement que subissent de nombreux pays en développement. De nombreux intervenants ont salué les mesures concrètes contenues dans le compromis de Séville, tout en appelant à des plans robustes pour leur mise en œuvre et leur suivi. Toutefois, les pays en développement, en particulier africains, ont plaidé pour un rôle plus central des Nations Unies dans la gouvernance mondiale de la dette souveraine et ont appelé à l'adoption d'un instrument juridique international pour faire face aux situations de crise de la dette. Les participants ont souligné l'importance de la transparence de la dette, de la création d'un registre centralisé des données sur leurs dettes, ainsi que de l'utilité d'instruments innovants tels que les échanges dette contre développement et les clauses de suspension du service de la dette. Ils ont salué les initiatives pertinentes annoncées dans le cadre de la plateforme d'action de Séville. Certains ont insisté sur la nécessité de réformes pratiques, notamment dans le cadre du G20, susceptibles de renforcer la confiance et de recueillir l'appui tant des créanciers que des débiteurs. Une attention particulière a également été portée aux défis spécifiques rencontrés par les petits États insulaires en développement, les pays à revenus intermédiaires, ainsi que l'impact des agences de notation sur le coût de l'endettement. Je vous remercie, Monsieur le Président.
Agradezco al representante de la copresidencia su declaración e invito ahora al excelentísimo señor Sedi Keita, ministro de Finanzas y Asuntos Económicos de Gambia, a presentar un resumen de la mesa redonda de múltiples interesados 6 sobre la reforma de la arquitectura financiera internacional y solución de problemas sistémicos, también en nombre del copresidente, el excelentísimo señor Carlos Cuerpo, ministro de Economía, Comercio y Empresa de España.
Good afternoon. I have the honor to present the summary of the Multi-Stakeholder Roundtable 6, entitled Reforming the International Financial Architecture and Addressing Systemic Issues, held this morning here in Seville. Also on behalf of my co-chair, His Excellency Carlos Caballero, Minister of Economy, Commerce and Business of Spain. Overall, participants called for a more just, fair, and democratic international financial architecture that reflects the reality of today and that meets the needs of developing countries and the Sustainable Development Agenda. Many participants reflected that domestic reforms and international reforms must go hand in hand and stated the urgency for reforms. Participants called for increasing the voice and representation of developing countries in international economic and financial institutions. Democratic governance for the international financial institution was suggested as critical to their effectiveness and legitimacy, with specific calls for quota reforms, more broad seats, and better representation in senior management. Speakers called for improving the usefulness of the special drawing rights as a critical component of the global financial safety net. Participants supported SDR rechanneling, including through multilateral development banks, the development of an SDR playbook, and stronger role for SDRs in the international monetary system, including fairer allocation of SDRs. Many countries call for a stronger safety net to better reflect vulnerability, particularly of small island developing states. Suggestions were made for strengthening the MDB, lending to developing countries, with many suggesting the need for higher lending capacities, as well as the incorporation of vulnerability in allocation decisions. A large number of interventions called for changes to the credit rating systems, suggesting that the ratings agencies' methodologies do not sufficiently address vulnerabilities and the investment fundamentals that countries are undertaking. I thank you for your kind attention.
Agradezco al copresidente su declaración Y esto concluye los resúmenes de las mesas redondas de múltiples interesados. Antes de seguir adelante, con arreglo a la organización de sus trabajos, la conferencia escuchará los puntos clave de los debates correspondientes a las vías para las partes interesadas que se celebraron en el marco de actos paralelos a la conferencia, a saber, el Foro Empresarial y el Foro de la Sociedad Civil. En primer lugar, cedo la palabra al señor José Viñals, asesor principal y expresidente de Standard Chartered, para informar a la conferencia de los puntos más destacados del Foro Empresarial.
Gracias, señor presidente. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for having me here today to issue a special statement on behalf of the International Business Forum, which are the activities which have been taking place in the pavilion next door. As you know, the United Nations Global Investors for Sustainable Development Alliance, GISD, which I have the honor of co-chairing, has, together with the International Chamber of Commerce, led the Business Steering Committee for FFD4. The Steering Committee represents tens of thousands of companies worldwide and has contributed to the FFD4 process on behalf of the private sector. And this process, together with your partnership, has led to meaningful representation and collaboration with the private sector throughout this week. Thousands of private sector representatives have interacted in the International Business Forum's official program and over 300 side events. So, we have spent a week talking about scaling up. And from these numbers, you can see that we have scaled up private sector participation and momentum in financing for development. Two clear messages have emerged from the conversations. First, the financial sector is, of course, driven by commercially attractive investment opportunities. The good news is that financing for development presents those opportunities, and we need to strengthen this narrative as we operate in a world of shrinking concessional resources. Second, to unlock these opportunities, we need enabling policy environments set at the national level that can encourage and not discourage international flows of finance from advanced economies where the money sits to the developing world where the money is needed. At the beginning of the week, the International Business Forum released a communiqué that accords with the Sevilla outcome document and which provides 5 concrete set of actions that the business community strongly believes can be catalytic in increasing private finance and investment for sustainable development. These areas for action are, first, scaling blended finance; second, developing country-led platforms of sustainable investment projects; third, creating interoperable sustainable finance legislation; fourth, addressing financial regulatory barriers; and fifth, extending finance to underserved sectors and communities. We believe this is an ambitious but achievable plan. It is definitely mission possible. Of all the policy topics negotiated throughout the FFD4 process and contained within the outcome document, we are recommending these 5 areas as where progress can be made to match ambition with action and move forward the UN SDGs. Until now, we have been in the ideation phase. Coming out of Seville, we have the roadmap. And we know from our conversations this week that the platforms and the partnerships already exist. The public sector and the private sector acting alone cannot deliver on this plan. But together, we can. The public sector has the rule book, can make policy. The private sector has the checkbook, can provide the financing. So now, we move to the implementation phase. The lives and the livelihoods of the communities we serve as private companies depend on this. and we must hold ourselves accountable. We look forward with your endorsement in the Compromiso de Sevilla, the Sevilla Compromise, to using the Business Forum Steering Committee as a key mechanism to ensure that the private sector is delivering on what it has set out to do, and to continue to advise this forum, the UN agencies and member states on establishing the necessary enabling conditions for private finance to flow at scale for sustainable development. Thank you.
Agradezco al señor Viñal su declaración y doy ahora la palabra a la señora Flora Sonkin, de la Sociedad para el Desarrollo Internacional, Mecanismo de Financiación de la Sociedad Civil para el Desarrollo, para informar a la conferencia de los puntos más destacados del Foro de la Sociedad Civil.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to deliver this statement from both the Feminist Forum and the Civil Society Forum. We, over 1,000 members of civil society organizations, trade unions, movements, and networks from around the world, actively engaging and contributing to the Financing for Development process since its inception, have convened both the Feminist Forum and a CSO Forum ahead of FFD4. This declaration is therefore both a reaction to the Compromiso de Sevilla and a political statement reflecting the shared recommendations we want to convey to UN member states and the international community. FFD4 is taking place at a time when the world is reeling with multiple crises, growing inequalities within and between countries, unsustainable debt burdens faced by the Global South that undermine the realization of human rights and the provision of public services, structural gender and racial inequalities, shrinking civic space, distant work deficit, continued illicit financial flows, including large-scale international tax abuse by corporations and by wealthy individuals, the rise in conflicts and militarism, cuts in official development assistance, and failure to uphold long-standing commitments while trillions are spent on wars and on genocide, the worsening triple planetary crisis, widespread hunger and malnutrition, growing fractures in the multilateral trade system. The SDGs are also largely off track, with 84% of its targets showing limited progress and even reversals. These massive challenges that we currently face are systemic in nature. Despite their gravity, they are not unsurmountable. They are deeply entrenched in and reproduced by the inequitable design of the current international financial architecture and the global economy. Overcoming these global challenges is, in fact, a political choice that requires an unwavering commitment to justice, equity, democracy, and the overall well-being of people and planet, in a way that we have continuously failed to see from decision makers, particularly those in the global north who benefit from the status quo. By adopting the Compromiso de Sevilla, member states compromised on the ambition of the outcome document that should have delivered to reflect the urgency of our times. We are also disappointed by the lack of transparency and accountability of the process, which excluded civil society from access to the attributed text, as well as from the last rounds of negotiations. Disclosure of civic space continued up to Sevilla, where civil society participation in the conference became tokenistic. This must not set precedent for future processes. Civil society remains seriously concerned by the lack of political will to embrace bold reforms and the blockage of any real progress shown in the negotiations, particularly by Global North countries, which continue to protect undemocratic institutions where they hold the decision-making power. We support Global South countries' proposals for actionable mandates for the reform of the international financial architecture, especially on debt and aid architectures, which were blocked throughout the negotiations, but they are a precondition to redress the colonial legacies enshrined in the current financial architecture and offer real pathways to unlock the much-needed resources for countries in the South to finance their own development priorities. The Compromiso de Sevilla stands as a compromise to the lives of millions of people in the Global South living under the subjugation of unsustainable debt, compounded by the hardest impacts of a climate crisis and ecological crisis to which they did little to contribute to. As usual, women are forced to bear the largest burden in times of crises and to fill in for the gaps resulting from austerity. A feminist approach to financing for development demands that these cross-cutting issues remain central in all areas of global economic governance. Far from being a testament to the success of multilateralism, the compromise text reflects the outcome of a race to the bottom pushed by the global north. The Civil Society Forum participants also raised the alarm on how no financial justice can be reached without an urgent end to escalating wars, territorial invasions, and genocide. We reject the militarization of aid and the diversion of development cooperation towards security objectives that perpetuate inequality and harm, and demand redirecting military spending towards financing public services, social infrastructure, and environmental resilience. The time to act is now. If all member states are serious about their claims to support inclusive, fair, democratic, and sustainable development for all, and to truly strengthen multilateralism, the FFD4 outcome should have reflected a genuine partnership between rights holders, member states, and development partners, based on power sharing, transparency, and accountability, strengthening the integrity and ambition of the Financing for Development agenda. Despite the sidelining of civil society voices, while enabling a corporate capture of development, which unsurprisingly led to an outcome document that reinforces the status quo, we refuse to accept this trajectory as inevitable. We will accept nothing less than a commitment to follow up from Sevilla, ensuring meaningful progress in the reform of the international financial architecture. This includes the commitment towards legally binding framework conventions on international tax, sovereign debt, and international development cooperation. A detailed version of both the statements of the Feminist and CSO Forum declarations with all our recommendations will be submitted. And in the meantime, as we have shown this morning with all the energy and the spirit of international solidarity that we brought to the CSO action that happened in the main hall, we look forward to staying engaged in this process and participating meaningfully towards a global financial architecture that works for people and planet. Thank you.
Agradezco a la señora Sonkin su declaración. La conferencia ha concluido así el examen del tema 9 del programa. Excelencias, distinguidas delegadas y delegados, la conferencia reanudará ahora su examen del tema 10 del programa titulado Aprobación del documento final de la conferencia. Se recuerda a las delegaciones que el proyecto de documento final titulado Compromiso de Sevilla fue aprobado en la primera sesión plenaria celebrada el 30 de junio. En esa reunión la conferencia decidió que se escucharía esta tarde cualquier declaración en explicación de voto respecto a la aprobación del proyecto de documento final. Antes de dar la palabra a las delegaciones para que expliquen su voto, quisiera recordarles que las explicaciones se limitarán a 3 minutos y que deberán hacerlas desde sus asientos. Interviene ahora, doy la palabra a Irak en nombre del grupo G77 y China.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to deliver this closing statement on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. In the interest of time, I will deliver a shortened version of our statement. We begin by once again to extending our sincerest appreciation to the government and people of the Kingdom of Spain for hosting this historic 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. We are deeply grateful for the generous hospitality and excellent arrangement provided throughout the days of the conference, which have contributed to a conducive environment for dialogue and engagement. Mr. President, the Group of 77 and China recognizes that progress has been achieved. Compromise outcomes have been secured in a number of key areas of financing for development, particularly those of a priority to developing countries. We are pleased to know the explicit recognition of the $4 trillion financing gap. We welcome the inclusions of language referencing the principle of the common but differentiated responsibilities as enshrined in the Rio Declaration, along with the reaffirmation of the right to development. The document further strengthens the importance of national ownership and international cooperation in the domestic resources mobilization, especially in the area of international tax cooperation. The group welcomes the recognition of the need to mobilize private resources at scale and speed, the step to support MSMEs through reviews of regulatory framework, and the call to scale up FDI in developing countries in accordance with the national investment priorities. The group supports the call to refrain from the unilateral coercive measures that are in breach of international law and the Charter of the United Nations, which hinder economic and social development, particularly developing countries. In conclusion, Mr. President, while the Group of 77 and China is pleased to join the consensus on this outcome document, we recognize it as an important first step forward, and therefore we call for its full, effective, timely, and balanced implementation. The deliverables must be translated into concrete action on the ground, and our collective efforts must continue to strengthen the financing for development agenda in support of developing countries. I thank you, Mr. President.
Doy las gracias a Irak en representación de G77 y China y doy la palabra ahora a Argentina.
Señor presidente, la delegación argentina reconoce la labor de los copresidentes y la mesa directiva del comité preparatorio de esta conferencia, así como de los cofacilitadores del proceso negociador del documento de resultados y del apoyo técnico de la Secretaría. Señor presidente, con relación al documento de resultados adoptados el 30 de junio bajo la numeración A/Conf 227/225/L1, la Argentina reitera los elementos de la explicación de posición realizadas el pasado 17 de junio en la sede de Naciones Unidas en Nueva York en ocasión de la sesión de cierre del cuarto comité preparatorio de esta conferencia. La delegación argentina se reserva el derecho de evaluar el texto en función de su posición nacional y ampliar su explicación de posición en ocasión del tratamiento del tema por parte de la Asamblea General de las Naciones Unidas. Señor presidente, para finalizar, hacemos extensivo nuestro reconocimiento al Reino de España, a la Comunidad de Andalucía y a la ciudad de Sevilla por su hospitalidad como anfitriones de estas conferencias. Muchísimas gracias.
Doy las gracias a Argentina por su intervención y ahora doy la palabra a China.
主席先生，中方祝贺本次会议通过塞维利亚承诺成果文件，并期待各方加强合作，合力帮助发展中国家解决好发展筹资问题。中方对于成果文件中关于债务问题、打击非法资金流动、发展援助等部分案文还有一些看法，会后将提交书面材料。再次感谢西班牙政府的热情款待。 谢谢主席。
Doy las gracias a China por su intervención. Hemos escuchado el último orador que ha hecho uso de la palabra para explicar su voto. La conferencia ha concluido así el examen del tema 10 del programa. Antes de proseguir, quisiera recordar a los participantes que el tema 6 del programa, titulado Organización de los Trabajos y otras cuestiones, que que se examinó en una sesión anterior sigue abierto. Dado que no hay otros asuntos que examinar en relación con el tema, la conferencia ha concluido así su examen del tema 6 del programa. La conferencia examinará ahora el tema 11 del programa titulado Aprobación del informe de la conferencia. Invito a la conferencia a examinar el documento A/Conf 227/2025/L.2 que contiene el proyecto de informe de la conferencia. A este respecto, invito a la relatora general de la conferencia, la excelentísima señora Matu Joini, representante permanente de Sudáfrica ante las Naciones Unidas en Nueva York, a presentar el proyecto de informe de la conferencia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have the honor to introduce the draft report of the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development, as contained in document A/Conf 227/2025/L2. Chapter 1 of the draft report reflects adoption of Resolution 1, entitled Sevilla Commitment, and Resolution 2, entitled Credentials of Representatives to the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development. Chapter 2 contains information on the organization of work and other organizational matters, including information on date and venue of the conference, attendance, opening of the conference, the election of the president and other officers, the adoption of the rules of procedures and the agenda, credentials of representatives to the conference, and documentation. Chapter 3 will be finalized to list the representatives who spoke during the general debate at each plenary meeting. Chapter 4 will be finalized to reflect on the proceedings of the 6 multi-stakeholder roundtables. Chapter 5 will also be finalized to reflect information on the consideration of the report of the Credentials Committee. Chapter 6 will be finalized to reflect information on the consideration by the conference of the draft outcome document of the conference. Chapter 7 and 8 will be finalized to reflect the proceedings of this meeting, including in relation to the adoption of the report of the conference and the closure of the conference. A list of documents before the conference will be referenced in the final report. Mr. President, that concludes my introduction of the draft report. I have the honor to submit to the conference the draft report for its adoption and seek the authorization of the conference to finalize the report after its closure with the support of the Secretariat. Thank you.
Doy las gracias a la relatora general de la conferencia, excelentísima señora Matu Joini. ¿Puedo considerar que la conferencia desea aprobar el proyecto de informe y autorizar a la relatora general a finalizar el informe en consonancia con la práctica de las Naciones Unidas? Si no hay objeciones, así queda acordado. La conferencia ha concluido así el examen del tema 11 del programa y ahora tomaremos un breve descanso antes de afrontar la clausura definitiva de la conferencia. Muchas gracias.